Okay. Hey, Senator, this is Jeff Hirsch at Channel 12 in Cincinnati. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, Jeff, how are you?
Good.
Good. Seen you in a while.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. So let's get to the health care because that's coming, the vote presumably tomorrow in the House. If the Republican health bill passes the House, and it's a big if at this point, it goes to the Senate and all the word seems to be DOA in the Senate. If it is DOA, do you think it is, first of all? I know it's the other party that controls the Senate, but do you think that the health care bill, the Republican bill, as written, if it comes out of the House, is just toast in the Senate?
I can't judge what its chances are in the Senate. I can judge, though, that if this bill were to pass and be signed by President Trump, in Ohio there are right now 200,000 people who are in the midst of opioid addiction treatment. 200,000 people who are getting that treatment because of the Affordable Care Act. And if it were to pass, it would be like that for most of them, that the treatment would just stop. And I cannot imagine that a bill like that can pass either house when you think of the terrible impact that would have on so many families in Ohio and across the country.
You mentioned opioids, and I know you have a bill, you're co-sponsoring a bill to try to minimize the flow of fentanyl into Ohio, into the United States, but into Ohio, of course, it's a big problem. If this goes through, how optimistic are you? This shows, yeah, there can be some bipartisanship in this era of ill will.
Yeah, I'm working with Senator Rubio and others, a Republican from Florida, Senator Portman, working with on some other approaches to this. But what our legislation does is it gives more resources to the border people, the Border Patrol for us, to be able to detect fentanyl when it's coming across the border. One of the biggest problems with opioid addiction now is this much more powerful than heroin or than OxyContin or oxycodone drug called fentanyl is killing far too many people in our state. It comes mostly from overseas, sometimes in small packets, sometimes in big shipments. We have the technology, if we have the resources on the border, to detect it and stop it, which will mean that if we can, it's always hard in a drug war to dry up supply with demand what it is, but it's part of what we need to do, coupled with treatment that the Affordable Care Act offers and community clinics and all the local people that are doing good prevention, education, and treatment.
Is there, excuse me, if it passes, is there a time frame by which this new effort can be implemented?
Well, I'm hopeful that we can move quickly on this. As I said, there are other senators like Senator Portman and others that are following different tracks. We hope to pull it all together as quickly as possible because this is a public health emergency. This opioid addiction in Ohio, as most know now, is more people die in our state than any state in the country. The 6 states larger than us have fewer deaths than we do. It's a terrible public health emergency and epidemic, and we need to address it more quickly than we have as a nation. And it means Columbus has got to get its act together. It means nationally Congress and the president have to get their act together.
We're just hearing about an apparent terrorist attack outside Parliament in London, and it seems every few months we hear something, a car or whatever, something you used to think as a weapon. Are we now just in the world where this is just going to happen? I mean, we try hard, and we just have to accept a new reality, as bad as it is, that every once in a while these things are going to happen in the world?
I don't think we ever accept the reality that these attacks are inevitable. We are a resilient country that knows how to deal with almost everything. But I think what it says is that we need the resources, not billions and billions more dollars for expensive weapons of war, but that we invest in local police departments, local county sheriffs, local drug interdiction, local treatment facilities, all the kinds of things that we need to do to detect terrorism, to detect particularly homegrown terrorism. I mean, that's becoming most I listened today to the former Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, and he believes, as more and more people do, that it's more likely homegrown terrorists, not somebody coming here from Syria. They are generally vetted pretty well, but it's people that might have been born here and somehow are radicalized, and we need better trained and more resourced local law enforcement officials to be able to root that out and stop it before it happens.
Obviously a huge week in Washington with the FBI director's testimony. However these ongoing investigations turn out into the Russian hacking and the election and the potential possible involvement of the Trump campaign, what has this done to democracy in the United States and the presidency, the perception in the United States and the perception abroad, however this turns out, even if everybody's exonerated or no harm is ultimately found?
Well, the perception abroad is concern from all of our longtime allies. When the President of the United States has accused the Brits of spying on us, attacked the government of Australia, treated coldly, without almost hostilely, the leader of Germany, people that have been our allies since World War II or longer, and obviously in the case of England, it's a concern around the world. I'm hopeful that the president, I want to get these questions about Russia answered. I want to get these questions, the FBI investigation of the president, which is obviously very real. I want to get that over with so the president can focus with Congress on what are we going to do to build crumbling infrastructure? What are we going to do to create jobs? How do we renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement? How do we fix healthcare and education? I want our attention on that. Instead, the president accusing his predecessor of committing a felony by wiretapping, or criticizing, pointing fingers at the Brits, or calling a large number of Americans the old Soviet term, enemy of the people. That is just not helpful. We need to focus on the problems we have and the reason that this president was elected, to create jobs, especially in areas where people have been hurting.
Does it bother you that so many Republicans in Congress don't come out and say some of these things the president is saying are just ridiculous? I mean, some do, some criticize it, but others just seem kind of go, well, okay.
Yeah, I would think in 5 years or maybe in 1 year, people are going to look back and say, where was the president's own party when he said things, when he accused 3 million people of voting illegally, when he accused his predecessor of committing a felony, when he made statements that clearly weren't true? Where was his own party in saying, stop that, Mr. President, you got to tell the truth, and we've got to focus on issues that are important to people? And I am disappointed. I don't judge my colleagues. I don't really judge the other party and its internal behavior, but I think history will. So I think the sooner that Republicans begin to join courageous patriots like John McCain and stepping up and standing up to when the president says something that's simply not true and something that hurts our country, that they would be there to be counted on.
It looks like the president's Supreme Court nominee will be approved by the Senate, certainly, whether it's along party line votes or any Democrats join in. But what will this mean for the balance on issues, particularly a lot of the issues that you're involved in, care about? If he's approved, and it looks like he will be.
Well, what bothers me about, well, I don't know if he'll be approved or not. Lots of things happen between now and the vote. But what bothers me about Judge Gorsuch, and the reason I'm voting against him, is that he subscribes to the view that corporations are people. And that's I'm not a lawyer, but that's a relatively new jurisprudence concept in this country. It's not been widely held until the Supreme Court. And what that means is that the courts will support corporations over workers, will support polluters over communities, will support Wall Street over consumer protection. And I just think our country already too much, the people at the top, the system is too stacked for people at the top against the broad middle class and against the working poor and against everybody else. And I don't want another Supreme Court justice that's going to come down on the side of corporate interests time after time after time at the expense of the rest of the country.
We've seen, this is sort of healthcare related, well, it is healthcare related. We've seen a lot of town hall meetings with Republican representatives, and they've been very loud and almost chaotic. Do you see yourself having any kind of meetings like that in the Cincinnati, not necessarily loud and chaotic, but do you see yourself having town hall meetings in our area in the near future?
Well, I do. Most of the way I see the state and learn from people is smaller roundtables, always open to the press, open to the public, but I'll sit with 10 or 15 people around a table and ask them questions, and I get all kinds of ideas for legislation, whether it's agriculture or veterans or job creation. But I do remember the first town hall I did on the Affordable Care Act back several years ago was in Cincinnati at UC, and I remember people, there was a big difference of opinion. It was rowdy, it was loud, it wasn't always friendly, but it was people on both sides. And I'll never forget, somebody stood up and said, "I'm against Obamacare, keep government out of my Medicare." And it was just, the fact is Medicare is obviously a government program that's worked for the country. The Affordable Care Act has worked for the country. 800,000 people in Ohio have insurance that didn't before. And I joined the governor of my opposite party, Governor Kasich, in saying don't repeal the Affordable Care Act unless you're going to find a way to insure those 700,000, 800,000 people.
Senator, thank you very much. I'm told we're out of time. Good to talk to you again. We'll see you again in the future.
Always. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for your services, doing your job so well. Thanks.
Thank you.